Hi, Steve with Hammered Hide Leather. Welcome back. I told you a couple, 3 weeks ago that we were going to do a small wallet, and I promised it was going to be the next week. Um, for those of you that work in the craft, you know how time can get away from you, and it has gotten away from me. I've been real busy, but we are back, and today we're going to try to do at least one video. It may take two, but it's going to be the first video of a small, very nice little wallet. This little guy right here. Minimalist, yes. It's only got 3 pockets, one in the middle, 2 out sideways, made up of 4 parts. 4 parts of leather, some thread, and you have a nice little wallet. However, with the pattern we're going to talk about, this one, you can make several different kinds of wallets. They're virtually the same wallet, but because if you do it out of different materials, it comes out differently. This is one of the first ones I made, which is just, it's pretty heavy. It's about 4 or 5 ounce veg tan, and I didn't put the center pocket in it. I put a little bill holder out there. Works great. Nice little gifts to give away. You can make them out of lighter leather, like this is upholstery leather, you know, for guys or gals, and give them away as presents. It's a great first product or project for somebody trying to get into leather. Great one for kids. The kids can help make one of these, and won't be long before they can make it on their own. It's not really that difficult. This right here will help you out immensely. Just make a little pattern. Now, if you cannot make this pattern or don't want to, you get a hold of me at stevegilworth@gmail.com, and I'll send you this pattern. It's real simple. All it really is a card 3 3/4 inch by 3. These holes on this pattern, the one I've made up, the holes are 3/16 of an inch in from the outside to the center, and about 1/4 of an inch apart. That's kind of irrelevant in measurements as far as the holes go. What you're really trying to do is simply come up with holes that are relatively even spaced, so you have a nice stitch line when you go around the outside. That's all it is. And then at the top, this little top part up here, you don't even need it. I mean, I made some of them here that do not have that finger pull, but you can just leave it straight across. Again, I'll send this to you if you cannot make this yourself or don't want to. Not a problem. Other things that we need to make this little wallet. Hammer, mallet, anything will work. You can go out in the garage, I bet. There's probably something laying around your house that's already a hammer that's good for this project. I've got $80 mauls and hammers around here all over the place. This is one of the first ones I ever bought. I think I paid 20 bucks for it, and I've had it forever. It's what I use. It's 16 ounce. It's plenty heavy, even for relatively heavy tooling. The good news is that it doesn't wear you out. That little hammer right there, you can wheel that thing 8 hours, and it's not going to. You're not going to suffer fatigue from it. And I can tell you, if you're doing this for a living, you're doing this 7 days a week, and you're doing it for long hours. So fatigue is something you most definitely have to take into consideration. So, some kind of a hammer. Along with the hammer, punches. You can get these punches not only at Tandy Leather. There's places like Springfield, Weaver. You can get them online, Amazon, but you can also go over to Harbor Freight, and very often Harbor Freight will have these little punches. Doesn't have to be a real expensive one. I'm not trying to harp on spending a lot of money right off the bat. See if you like it before you go out and spend a ton of money. Another beautiful part of these kind of projects is that A, you get them pretty quick. There's kind of like instant gratification, and B, you don't need to spend a lot of money on tools. Now, these particular punches, one is about a 1/16. I think that the one that I use for the diesel punch that I have also told you we're going to have plans for, it is, I think, a 5/64. Let me take a look. Yeah, 5/64 punch. And even though the diesel punch that we're making has a chuck in it that will take up to 1/4 of an inch, I think it is, as far as the diameter of your punch. For the most part, the diesel punch is going to use those that have the smaller shaft like this. Any one of these punches will work in the diesel punch. And also, any one of them would work for the wallet or pretty much anything else that you're making. And I'm going to put a picture of one of the bags, one of Tony's patterns that we did, Diesel Punk. And once you get to the point where you know how to make this, it's just repetition on making his larger products, or for that matter, making any larger product or project. It's repetition. It's just a certain amount of diligence and patience to get to it, but that's pretty much what you need for anything you're going to make by hand. And this is no different. Other tools, a cutting device of some type. This is just a good old-fashioned razor knife, Home Depot, Lowe's. The only thing is, before I start cutting anything, I'm going to take a strop and I'm going to get a little bit of Jeweler's Rouge, put it on there, even a new blade, and even a ceramic blade, which we'll get to in our swivel knife. They have the ability to have a ceramic blade, and just strop it. This will make a huge difference in your ability to cut and the cleanliness of it. So that's that. Of course, we're going to need needle and thread. These little needles right here, I'm going to be repetitious in the beginning videos as to where you can get things as far as supplies. Tandies are everywhere. I'm not saying Tandy's good for everything, and I don't get sponsored by anybody, not Tandy, not no one, but they're around, and so you can go there and usually find these little stitching needles. I like the smaller ones. There's, I think, 3 sizes at least. There may be more, but I know that I like the smallest of the stitching needles. And stitching thread. Now this is where there's a preference here. I prefer old school wax thread. It's what old school saddles were made of. It's, you know, it's kind of the traditional thread for leather. Now nowadays you can get other thread, and I'm not going to get into it, but there's other threads that you can buy in a variety of places that are not waxed. You can't use waxed thread, for instance, in a sewing machine, but for hand stitching, that's what I prefer. And then I go a little bit further in, and I know it's not going to be easy to see this, but this is the kind of, again, the thinner traditional thread, and it looks like thread. I go for this, which is called woven cord. I'm tired, folks. It's called woven cord, and it is thicker. It actually has a weave to it, and it has a kind of a flat appearance if you look at it real close. One thing, it's easier to put your needles together, but the other thing about it is that it gives a much bulkier look to your thread, if that's the right term. It looks thicker, and I like that look. Another nice tool to have, not essential, but it helps if you're laying out the holes, laying out your pattern. I use it for a variety of reasons. I would say that this is a little bit down the line. I wouldn't get it tomorrow, but just keep in mind that you'll see this divider being used quite frequently here. I use it for a variety of layout, and it works really well. It's also something that you can set up. Let's say that I wanted to do a 3/16 inch hole. I would set it at 3/16 and run down here, and it'll give you a line. This does not have ink, does not have a pencil lead, but it works really well for a lot of things. That's about it. It doesn't take a whole lot of materials as far as tools go to do this. I think you could do everything on this table that you would need to make this project for maybe $20. Not much more, if it's any more. So let's get into this. First thing we're going to do, we're going to start with a piece of leather. Now, I have cut out, and I will end up with a nice wallet that looks like this. But for demonstration purposes, so you can see it better, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to use this kind of leather. This is just veg tan leather. This is very lightweight. I had it around here. It might even be a little bit too light for this, but we're going to see. I wouldn't hesitate to use it for your first project. It's going to be the least expensive. It's very easy to work with because it's so thin. And we'll see how it turns out, see what it looks like. Okay? Let's get into it. Okay. Let's start with some fun here. Finally getting in on a piece of leather. One thing I did not mention before, there is a small angled piece right here too. That makes up this piece. This is another thing where the angle irrelevant. It's not really a big deal about the size. I think that from the bottom of this thing up is about 1.75 inches. All I really tried to do was end up with an angle that started out under the first hole and kind of went somewhere in between holes over there. It just makes it easier to do a stitch over to fasten those down. That's all this is. I double stitched that so it holds them, it has more longevity. But for demonstration purposes, I wouldn't maybe normally do this, but I'm going to use an ink pen so you can see what's going on here on the veg stand leather. And once you have your pattern cut out, it's just something as simple as running around and having a pen that runs out of ink, of course, mandatory. You just come around. Now you can do this in a few ways. You can wet the leather, make it damp, and just take some kind of a stylus, an old ink pen with no ink in it. You're going to see that that's how we transfer designs here coming up real shortly, but it'll give you the basic design. And then once this is over, this is why I say make it out of a card, because then it makes it real easy just to come in here and do all of your holes. And what I'm going to show you here in a second is why you want to always use this pattern in the same direction. And I'll explain that in a minute here. Sorry for this taking a little longer, but... And by the way, in that last video, you saw me space out knowing what the cord was. It's a lot of hours you spend doing this. And so I thought, I'm not going to cut it out. It's real. That's what happens. And by the way, it's worth it. It's something I love to do, something you'll love to do. So if it takes a little time, it takes a little time. It's worth it. Now, when you get to the point where you've got your pattern laid out, you can take your straight edge, put it on there, and just cut it out. That's all you're doing. Very simple. Cut it out. And I'm going to show you another little tool that I really like. Not that you have to have it, but once you get your pieces cut out, to give it kind of a little more professional look, this is a little thing, again, I got at Harbor Freight. You can buy versions of this on Amazon. All it is just a little circular punch. And all this does is it just cleans up the edges a little bit. Gives it a little bit more professional look. I'll show you this close up here in a second. It's just a little curve. This is actually a gouge. It's for carving wood. But I use it, I've had it for years. It's got a little bit of a rounded point on there. You can get on Amazon. Matter of fact, Tony talks about these with Diesel Punk. You can get these on Amazon that are actually set up. I think each kit has anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 punches. Very cheap, you know, $7, $8, $10 at the max. But that just gives it a little bit more of a professional look. And then in this case, because our pattern does have that little finger cutout, you just cut it out. There you go. Now, this card, let me tell you something that's going to help you out when you're using your pattern. Whatever side you start with, sometimes, I mean, if I have front on it, as long as I'm keeping it the same way each time. And this time I started out with it over here where it's got the numbers on it, just because that's how I had it in my hand. It's important for your own ease of assembly, especially in the beginning when you're not used to making these. Like I said, they're made up of 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. And what I try to do is this. These 2 pieces, all right, let's first of all scrutinize the pieces individually. You're going to need 2 pieces exactly the same of that pattern that we made. 2 of them. Here, You'll also need 2 of these exactly the same. Even though when it's done, this one is going to be like that, it's still two each of the same piece. So you take one set, set it to the side, and take this set, and you're going to set it like this on your board, and you take this set, and you set it like this. The reason I say that is this. When you come over here with your pattern, you're going to want to cut your holes all the way through with this part up. Why? Because no matter how good you are at putting these holes in here, if you try to do this and then turn it over, that one of those holes, maybe 4 of those holes, will be slightly offline, which one way or the other. And if you try to start flipping these over, although theoretically the holes you want them to all line up, you're going to end up with a hole that's a little off that way, a hole that's a little off that way when you turn it, and then your holes won't line up. So to make that something that does not happen, just keep your pattern the same way up, each thing you do. Okay? Now, these holes over here, I'm going to use the 5/64 because that's what I'm used to using, that's what I like. By the way, the reason that you use these punches is that traditionally they're going to be smaller holes. Here's an awl you use. You know, you go around doing a saddle stitch, which is what we're going to be doing, and you poke individual holes as you go. But that takes a certain amount of time and skill to perfect that method. And since this is not something that we're worried about trying to reproduce exactly the traditional way of doing things, then we're going to do it like this. And for those of you who've seen the diesel punch, this is exactly what the diesel punch I'm going to show you takes care of. All of this noise. This is a lot of noise when you've got 500 holes to punch in a big bag. Can you do it? Absolutely we can do it. We're doing it right now. You can punch as many as you want. And in some form or fashion try to get rid of all of these little shards. But the diesel punch, we've kind of overcome all of that, so we'll get to that down the line a little bit. Now, when you get all of your holes punched out and you've lined everything up so that it's the way you want it, then comes actual assembly. I'm going to skip a little bit here now and go ahead and punch out the holes. I mean, all I'm doing is exactly what we just did here in repetition. I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off so it doesn't bore you to death, and we'll get back to you once all those holes are taken care of. Okay, we're ready to get our needles and cord ready to stitch. First of all, of course, we have our 2 needles. This is a true saddle stitch, so it's going to go back and forth with 2 needles, and in this case, cord. If you flatten the cord, or for that matter, the thread will flatten out too, to some degree, it just makes it easier to get it in your needle. And once it's in the needle eye, you take the needle and go back through the thread and then pull it all tight, and that's a loaded needle. Same thing with the other end. Go through the eye of the needle, 1/2 inch, 3/4. Take the needle, go right back through the thread, and we are ready to stitch. This book is absolute gold. It's lacing stitching for leathercraft, and it's been around forever. But there's a lot of ways to enjoy leather work, a lot of different ways to actually make a little money at leather work. A lot of folks are going to get really good at tooling. A lot of people are going to get good at making bags, any number of things that you can do. However, if you don't learn anything other than stitching and lacing, you can do pretty good in leather work just in that. And this book is great for that. It has every kind of lacing, every kind of stitch, all of it. And it's all illustrated so nicely that it's easy to read, easy to follow. And it goes all the way up from basic, really basic like saddle stitch, all the way up through lacing, triple loop, Mexican basket weave, all of it's in here. And all of it's very easy to read and very easy to understand. Like I said, if all you learned to do was what's in this book, you could actually have a business going. You could be making wallets like we're making right now with no tooling experience at all. And no real artistic flair. So it's just a great book to keep in mind for that. All right, finally, we get to the assembly part. We have our needles and thread. We're going to start our saddle stitch off by one needle going through the top hole, making sure that they have an even amount of cord on each side, and then you go through the second hole. And because this cord is thick, it's very easy to take this next needle that we're going to go through with and go through the cord. Then you end up with a knot. Not the end of the world, it's easy to get it out, but the fact of the matter is we don't want to do any additional work we don't have to. So I take these and just pull them back. Just pull the thread that just went through the hole back a little bit, and then put your second needle through the front of the hole. I can't see it very well. There we go. And with any luck at all, you won't go through that thread. In this case, this right here is a joint. This is where this side hooks up. This one over here hooks up on the other end with the little angled piece. And I want a little additional strength in that. So I'm going to go through once again that top hole. Pull our thread up snug. And now go back down through the second hole. So we've ended up with a double stitch at the top. That's what I was talking about a little while ago, a back stitch. Same thing as in sewing on a sewing machine, but in this case, it's just the same thing with hand sewing. And then it's just a matter of a complete, just repetition. You just go back down through here. Sometimes you have to work with it a little bit if the holes aren't perfectly matched up, but it's no big deal. And when you're stitching, the side you want to look the best is the side that you kind of focus in on. In this wallet, you want both sides to look nice. So we're going to have to work both sides that look nice as far as the stitch goes. I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because I usually am sitting where I can see the hole, but you can move this around any way you want. And I'll even tell you this little clamp right here is a Jorgensen wood clamp. I'm going to move it a little bit. It holds things just fine. In fact, it was something I've had in the garage for a long time. Stitching ponies are not cheap, and it seems like they're kind of hard to get to do all the things you want them to do. A good example is I might have something that works really good for a motorcycle seat that doesn't work so good for a wallet or a belt. So in your shop you will end up with a variety of things that will hold your project. Now I'm down here to this part, and again it's a joint. It's a junction. So I'm going to go back once, back one hole, back one hole, snug it down, then moving forward again. Nice and snug. And all that is just you want to continue to go in a repetitive motion. Again, pull the thread out of the way so your next needle doesn't go through it again. And by the way, I'm going to show you something here. Let's just say, I'm going to make it do it here. Let's see if I can get it to do it. Let's just say your needle did go through. There we go. Let's say it went through the thread, going through the hole. You end up with this little knot here. Because what's happened is that needle went through that thread. Now, you can try to fish this back through there and try to somehow or other get it to go back through the hole that it came through. You can frustrate yourself to no end that way. The easiest way is just to take this bad boy right off of here. By the way, this little tool here, you might want to get one of these. It doesn't have to be this, it could be an ice pick with a dulled point on it. But something like this is very handy for a lot of reasons. One reason is you can actually line holes up that don't line up, and that happens. You know, so you get this some kind of tool like this, then you can line your holes up. The other thing you can use it for is if the hole isn't, you know, leather wants to close up. That's why you used to have awls that you had in your hand, and as you were stitching, you poke the hole as you went because the leather would close back up. But in this case, we have big enough holes, we don't really have to worry too much about that. But now, we've taken the needle off of this one. Now you just pull it through and pull it out of the knot. There's the hole that was in it. And all you do then is just rethread your needle. This time, pull the thread out of the way so that when this goes through, it doesn't hang up. Good to go. Good to go. And you just keep going until you get to the other end. Okay, so you just keep working around till you get to the end, and we'll show a couple ways to finish that off here. Now, I wanted to say something. Earlier, I was talking about taking your individual pieces and just spot gluing them a little bit with contact cement. In the event you were going to burnish this, which means that you're going to sand this down and clean it up and really try to get a nice smooth finish on there, it's pretty important that you actually contact cement all the way around and that all of these edges are very tight together on each other. That's about the best way you're going to get a burnish. If you just spot it, what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up with places in between where the glue is that's going to want to fray and not smooth out nearly as nicely because the individual pieces won't stick together properly. So if you're going to burnish it, go ahead and spend a little bit more time on the actual contact cementing of it. Now here at the end, I'm doing the same thing we did on the other side when we had to double it up a little bit, because right here is a stress point. So all I'm doing is I'm just back stitching a few, By the way, when you're back stitching, you don't have to worry about this thing going through the thread. It can, if it pierces the thread, it doesn't matter, because you're not continuing on. Okay? And I would say if you wait 2, that's fine. I'm going to go down. I have a little bit of thread left, a little bit of cord left. So I'm just going to go down maybe one more if I can get it through. It's getting a little thick now. Okay, once again, this tool comes in handy because you can just push it right through, and then you've got a nice hole. And we get through there. Now, at this point, there are several different things you can do to end this. You can take this needle and go back in a hole and then come out through the side, like that. Bring the other one up through the side, tie it together, and then melt it off, and then tuck it back down in. There's some people that just, this is enough, and it probably is just fine. It would take a lot to unravel that. So if you didn't do anything but just snip these off, it would probably be just fine. Or just take a cigarette lighter and just burn them off, and it would probably be just fine. This right here is a wood burning kit, and I don't know if this knife has gotten hot enough yet, but these little wood burning kits, they come with a variety of different points and tools that you can screw into the end of it. And I like to use this because you can get right down in here and cut it off and mess up the rest of your wallet. That'll rub right out. This is pull-up leather, by the way, in case you wanted to know. Pull-up leather is very forgiving in that it's really nice and waxed. It's really, oiled, very oily. You can get a lot of color out of it by just stretching it, and it'll go right back to what it was by just rubbing on it. But the same, now I want to see, again, get a little better view here so I don't ruin the wallet. But like I said, you just take your little knife, cut it off, and that's the end of it. However, be real careful with this. Once you're done with it, turn it off, or you'll end up with something a lot warmer than you want it to be. So, we've made our little wallet. This is a perfect thing for a gift. It's a nice thing just to have for yourself. This is a great starter. This is a starter project, obviously. But in this project, you'll learn how to use a pattern, learn how to cut the hole or punch the holes, learn how to do your needles up, know a little bit about terminology, and you end up with a nice little wallet. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed making this little wallet. The next time we get together, we're going to start on something a little larger. We're going to make a small bag, and it's going to be an introduction into more advanced pattern usage and a few more tools involved with that. We're going to learn how to do rivets, and it's just going to be a great project. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to turn out to be a small bag, but the same process that we're using to make that small bag is exactly the same process that you use to make these larger bags, like this one here. This is one from dieselpunk.ro. That's a pattern that he sells. That's Tony's pattern. He sells a lot of amazing patterns. You ought to check it out. We're going to use his patterns every now and then as we can. But then we get on to motorcycle. I'm going to head towards motorcycle stuff pretty quickly here. That's my background. That's what I do. We're going to be doing bags and maybe a couple of seats, some wallets, some belts. But until we see you next time, stay safe and have fun, and see you later.